A story about the richest thing money can't buy. He had everything the world says matters, and nothing the heart truly needs, so he dressed like a nobody to find somebody real. What happened next broke him completely, and then saved him. The limousine stopped 2 blocks away from the restaurant. That was intentional. Marcus Hale, Forbes-listed, 3rd wealthiest man in the country, founder of Hale Industries, the man whose name was printed on hospital wings and university libraries, and whose photograph appeared on the covers of magazines that ordinary people bought at airport newsstands and read with a kind of dizzy, hungry admiration, stepped out of the back seat wearing a pair of worn dark jeans, a plain gray hooded sweatshirt, and a pair of scuffed sneakers that his assistant, Diana, had purchased from a thrift shop on Clement Street the previous Thursday. He stood on the sidewalk and let the limousine pull away. For a moment, he just stood there. The evening air was cold. San Francisco in December had a way of biting through clothing that had no business biting through. Thin fabric, insufficient insulation, the kind of chill that people who owned proper winter coats barely noticed, but that people without them felt in their bones. Marcus felt it now, in a way he hadn't felt cold in years. His coat, the charcoal cashmere overcoat that usually traveled with him everywhere between November and March, was folded carefully in the back of the limousine, being driven back to his penthouse on Nob Hill. He had told Diana to bring it when she picked him up. He hoped he wouldn't regret that. He started walking. The restaurant was called Calla. It was not an expensive restaurant, not by Marcus's standards anyway. It was the kind of place that had Edison bulbs strung above exposed brick, a seasonal menu printed on recycled cardstock, and a wine list that topped out at $65 a bottle. The kind of place where a first date felt romantic without feeling ostentatious. He had chosen it deliberately, through an intermediary, with care. The idea was to seem normal, approachable, like someone who existed in the regular human world of bus schedules and grocery lists and moderately priced Italian food. The blind date had been arranged by his college friend, Patrick Chen, who was one of perhaps 4 people on Earth who knew Marcus Hale well enough to understand that the man behind the magazine covers was profoundly, achingly lonely. "You need to meet someone real," Patrick had said 3 weeks ago over the phone. "Someone who doesn't already know who you are, someone who sees Marcus, not the portfolio." "That's not possible," Marcus had said. He'd believed it completely when he said it. "It is if you try," Patrick had said. "I know a woman. She's smart, she's beautiful, she teaches at a private school, she has no idea who you are, she doesn't follow business news, she barely uses social media. I've told her I have a friend named Marcus who works in tech. That's all. One dinner. Just be a person. Just be a person." Marcus had turned those words in his mind for days afterward. He'd repeated them quietly to himself in the elevator of his office building, in the back of the car, in the vast, silent bedroom of his penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Just be a person. As if that were something he could simply decide. As if personhood were a choice rather than a practice he had gradually, over 20 years of accumulating wealth and power, forgotten how to perform. He was 41 years old. He had been genuinely happy, he believed, at approximately 19. After that, things had gotten complicated in ways that money was supposed to fix and consistently failed to do. He had been in relationships, 3 serious ones. The first had ended when he was 32 and she wanted a man who came home before midnight. The second had ended when he was 36 and discovered through a mutual acquaintance that the woman had spent their 8-month relationship quietly furnishing a wish list and telling her friends she expected a ring and a prenuptial settlement within the year. "And what kind of tech?" she asked, cutting her bread roll with a knife. "Like startup stuff, or—" "I run a company," he said. "Hale Industries. It's a technology holding company, mostly." She looked at him blankly. The name meant nothing to her, which was, of course, exactly as Patrick had promised. But it also meant she had no particular reason to be impressed by him, and he could see, in the way she moved on quickly to asking about whether he had siblings, that she was filing him away somewhere in the category of mid-level tech worker with unremarkable ambitions. The conversation was not terrible. She was smart, clearly. She talked about a book she was teaching, The Great Gatsby, with genuine enthusiasm, and she made an observation about Fitzgerald's treatment of class and appearance that was sharp enough that Marcus found himself leaning forward slightly. She had a dry sense of humor that surfaced in unexpected places. In another context, in another version of this evening, he thought, she might have been someone he would have wanted to know. But the context was what it was. 40 minutes into dinner, after the entrees had arrived and been partially eaten, she excused herself to use the restroom. She came back with her phone in her hand, which she had not had out before, and there was a particular quality to her attention when she sat back down, a distracted, comparing quality, as if she had done something on her phone that had recalibrated her assessment of the evening. He would learn later from Patrick, who learned it from her, that she had texted her best friend from the restroom. The text said, "He's fine, I guess, but he showed up in a hoodie, like an actual hoodie, first date, not really what I was hoping for." Her friend had apparently texted back, "What does he do?" Brittany had replied, "Works in tech, some company called Hale Industries, never heard of it, probably a middle manager." He didn't know any of this at the time. He only knew that when she came back from the restroom, something had shifted. The conversation became more performative, less invested. She began checking her phone with increasing frequency, glancing at it on the table, then picking it up, then setting it down again in a way that made its presence very clear. She ordered a second glass of wine, but stopped asking him questions with any real curiosity. The evening was winding down. He could feel it. Not with hurt, not yet, but with the particular resignation of someone who had half expected this. It was when the check arrived that everything crystallized. The waiter placed it between them. Marcus reached for it immediately. Habit, instinct, the reflex of someone who had picked up the check at every meal for the last 20 years without thought. His hand landed on the small leather billfold. "Oh," Brittany said. She said it in a tone that was performing gracious surprise. "Are you sure? I'm happy to split." "I've got it," Marcus said. "How sweet," she said, and something in how she said it, the infinitesimal emphasis on sweet, with its faint connotation of well-intentioned but not quite there, the word you use for children and small animals, and men who are kind but not quite the caliber you were looking for, made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He opened the billfold and tucked in his card. A plain debit card. He had practiced this too. No black Amex, no titanium card, nothing with his name embossed in a font that cost more than a small car. Just a bank card. Just Marcus Hale. Ordinary man. She glanced at the card. It registered nothing on her face. He signed the receipt. They put on their coats. She had a beautiful wool coat, belted at the waist, and watching her put it on, he thought abstractly that she had organized her life into a very careful aesthetic, and that he was not fitting into it in the way she'd hoped. He held the door open. They walked out into the cold night together. On the sidewalk, they stopped. This was the moment, the fork in the road of every first date, the "where are we going from here," the "good night, I'll call you," the lean in or the step back. She was already stepping back. "Well," she said. She had her coat buttoned now, her hands in its pockets. She smiled at him. It was, "Why are you sad?" He looked up. She was standing approximately 4 feet away from him, regarding him with the direct, unfiltered assessment that only small children and very wise old people are capable of. She was perhaps 5 years old, maybe 6. She had dark, curly hair escaping from beneath a red knit hat with a pom-pom on top, cheeks pink from the cold, and enormous brown eyes that were currently conducting a thorough and completely unself-conscious examination of his face. She was wearing a puffy winter coat over what appeared to be striped pajama pants, and on her feet were rubber rain boots printed with yellow ducks. In her right hand, she was holding a Christmas cookie. The cookie was shaped like a star and decorated with white icing and silver sprinkles. It appeared to have had a bite already taken out of one of its points. She held it with the particular reverence that small children bring to beloved objects. "What makes you think I'm sad?" Marcus asked. She tilted her head. The pom-pom on her hat moved with the tilt. "You look like my hamster looked before he went to heaven," she said. "He sat in the corner of his cage and didn't move and had that face." Marcus looked at her for a moment. Then, despite himself, despite everything, despite the cold and the rejection and the bone-deep tiredness, he felt something shift in his chest, something that might, if pressed, have been described as the first faint movement toward a smile. "I'm sorry about your hamster," he said. "His name was Captain Sprinkles," she said gravely. "He was very brave." "He sounds like he was." She took a small step closer, studying him still. She did not appear to have any concept of stranger danger, or perhaps had simply decided that he passed whatever internal test she'd applied. "I have a cookie," she said. "It's the last one. It's a star." "I can see that," he said. "Do you want some?" She was holding it out to him, offering him her last Christmas cookie, her most prized remaining possession, held toward him in a small mittened hand with complete sincerity, no calculation behind it, no expectation of return, just the pure, undiluted instinct of a child who had looked at a sad person and thought, "I have something good, maybe they should have some." Something happened in Marcus Hale's chest that he was not prepared for. It was not a big thing. It was a very small thing, a tiny hairline fracture in something that had been closed and sealed for a very long time, like the first creak of ice at the beginning of spring. Barely anything, barely audible, but he felt it. "Thank you," he said, and he took the smallest piece from the edge of the star that had already been bitten, the very tip of one point, and he put it in his mouth. Shortbread, buttery and sweet, with a hint of vanilla. Her face bloomed into a smile of radiant satisfaction, as if she had solved something important. "It's good, right?" she said. "It's the best cookie I've ever had," he said. This was, in the peculiar way of emotional truth, entirely accurate. She sat down on the bench beside him with the casual confidence of someone who has assessed a situation and made a decision. She sat close, not touching, but close, in the way children sit when they've decided you like you, with an easy trust that most adults have long since abandoned. She held her remaining cookie in both hands and swung her rubber duck boots, which did not quite reach the ground. "I'm Lily," she said. "I'm Marcus." "Why are you out here in the cold, Marcus?" He considered the question. He could have said many things. He could have given the adult-to-child version of an answer, the simplified, deflecting version designed to redirect without revealing. Instead, he said something close to honest. "I had dinner with someone, and it didn't go very well." Lily absorbed this. "A friend?" "Someone I was hoping might become a friend." "Oh," she said. She thought about this with the serious concentration she appeared to bring to most things. "Did you fight?" "Not exactly. She just decided she didn't like me very much." Lily looked at him with an expression that managed to be both sympathetic and frankly incredulous. "Why?" she said. "You seem fine." He almost laughed. "You seem fine," the most uncomplicated assessment he had received in years. No performance, no agenda, no layered reading of his net worth. Just, "You seem fine." The evaluation of someone with no context and no filter and nothing to gain. "Thank you, Lily," he said. "That means a lot." "Sometimes people are just mean," she said philosophically, taking another bite of her cookie. "In my class, there's a boy named Theo who says my drawings look like blobs, but Miss Patterson says that's because Theo doesn't understand art." "Miss Patterson sounds like a smart woman." "She is. She lets us have free drawing on Fridays." She looked at him. Maybe the lady who didn't like you just doesn't understand you, like Theo doesn't understand art. He looked at her, this small person in the pom-pom hat with her duck boots and her philosophy and her dwindling Christmas cookie. Maybe, he said, and the word came out thicker than he intended. Lily and I come here every year to see the Christmas lights. Mom and I get hot chocolate and cookies from the market on Saturday, but today is Sunday and the market was closing when we got here, so we only got 2 cookies. I ate one already. She gestured with the remainder of her star. This is the second. The voice came from the path behind them. Not sharp, not alarmed, but with the particular texture of a parent who has turned around and discovered their child is 6 feet away from a stranger on a bench. Marcus turned. She was walking toward them quickly, a paper cup of something warm in each hand, a canvas bag over one shoulder. She was perhaps mid to late 30s, with dark curly hair similar to Lily's but longer, wearing a coat that had been well maintained but was not new, and sensible boots. She had Lily's same brown eyes. She was pretty in a way that was entirely unaware of itself, the kind of pretty that comes from good bones and a face that has been lived in honestly. "Lily, what have I told you about walking away from Mom?" she said, her voice doing the careful parental thing of being firm without being scary. "I just saw the sad man," Lily said, as if this were a fully sufficient explanation. The woman reached them and looked at Marcus with the swift, calibrating look of a mother assessing a stranger near her child. He saw her take in his appearance, the sweatshirt, the scuffed shoes, the bench, and he waited for the specific quality of wary judgment he had become skilled at reading. It didn't come. What came instead was something more matter-of-fact. She looked at him the way you look at a person, simply, directly, without the calculation of social hierarchy. And then, because Lily was looking between them with expectant satisfaction, she said, "I'm so sorry. I hope she wasn't bothering you." "Not at all," Marcus said. She was being very kind. The woman looked at her daughter. Lily was holding the remaining 3/4 of her Christmas cookie and wearing the expression of someone who has done a good deed and would like it noted. "She gave me some of her cookie," Marcus said. "She said I needed it more." Something crossed the woman's face then, a complicated thing, the expression of a parent recognizing their child doing something that reflects well on the person they're trying to raise, and she seemed, for a moment, not to know what to do with it. "Of course she did," she said softly. She looked at Lily with the particular expression that love makes when it's trying to not show too much of itself in public. "Lilybug, what if we talked about sharing?" "That it's important," Lily said promptly, and they sat under the Christmas lights for a while without any particular agenda. This was, Marcus realized, almost unprecedented in his adult life. He did not sit without agendas. He did not have unscheduled conversations. Every moment of his day for 20 years had been optimized, arranged, purposed. Even his so-called downtime was structured. Workout sessions with trainers, dinners with contacts, charity events with PR value. Time was, in Marcus Hale's world, the most expensive and carefully guarded commodity. He was sitting on a park bench in the cold, drinking free hot chocolate, talking to a stranger and her 5-year-old daughter, and he could not think of a single thing he would rather be doing. Sarah taught, not English like Brittany. She was a nurse, a pediatric nurse at UCSF Children's Hospital, where she had worked for 9 years. She said this without the particular flavor of wanting credit for it that some people brought to the disclosure of noble professions. She said it the way people say things that are simply true, as fact, as description, as shorthand for a large portion of who she was. "Do you like it?" he asked. She considered this with the care of someone who takes questions seriously. "I love it, and it destroys me in equal measure," she said. "Some days I come home and feel like I've done the most important thing it's possible to do. Other days I sit in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes because I don't know how to carry it home." She looked at her hands wrapped around her hot chocolate cup. but I can't imagine doing anything else. I tried once. I worked in admin for 8 months. I felt like I was underwater. What brought you back? A 7-year-old named Marco told me that I smelled like strawberries and that I was his favorite person at the hospital, she said. He said it very seriously, like he was awarding a prize. I cried in the supply closet and put in my transfer request the next day. Lily, who had been engaged in the very serious business of eating the final remnants of her star cookie in a careful sequence that was clearly designed to maximize the last few bites, looked up. She still cries sometimes, she said informatively. Lily, but happy crying is okay, Lily added. She told me that. Happy crying is very okay, Marcus agreed. Sarah looked at him sideways, and in the half-light of the Christmas strings, there was something warm in her face. Not romantic, not yet, not exactly, but the expression of someone who is being pleasantly surprised, repeatedly, by a conversation they hadn't expected to have. "What about you?" she asked. Patrick. She knew Patrick, too. She was the date Patrick had suggested, and declined after her own previous experience with blind dates. She and Patrick had been neighbors 7 years ago, and when Patrick had mentioned arranging something, she had laughed and said, "I don't do blind dates anymore." And Patrick had said, "This is different. Just think of it as hot chocolate with a stranger." And she had, apparently, said, "Maybe." And then tonight, when Lily had begged for the Christmas market lights, she had thought, why not? And here they were. Tech is a generous description, Marcus said. I run a company. It's mostly managing, making decisions, handling problems. Less exciting than it sounds. Is it exciting? He thought about it. Really thought about it, rather than giving the performed answer. It used to be. When I started, when everything was uncertain, when I was 23 and didn't know if any of it was going to work, that was exciting. Every day felt like it mattered, like something was being built. He looked at the white lights in the winter trees. Now I mostly feel like I'm maintaining something, protecting what's already built. It's important work, I'm not complaining, but it's different, she said. Yes. That happens, she said. When you're a new nurse, every day is terrifying and exhilarating. You're learning so fast that you feel like you're growing in real time. And then, at some point, you realize you know what you're doing, and the terror goes away, and you miss it a little, because the terror was proof that it mattered. He looked at her. Yes, he said, exactly that. They looked at each other for a moment in the comfortable silence that happens between people who have recognized something in each other, an alignment of a particular kind of understanding that doesn't announce itself, just settles. Mama, can we come back next Saturday? We come every Saturday. But can we come here? Lily said, gesturing at the bench, the lights. And maybe Marcus can come. Lily? He likes it here, Lily said. She looked at Marcus for confirmation. You like it here. He opened his mouth to give the demurring adult answer, the appropriate, non-committal, socially calibrated answer. 3 weeks later. His phone rang at 6:47 in the morning on a Tuesday, and it was his PR director, Jonathan Fields, calling from what sounded like his car, which meant it was urgent enough to not wait until the office. We have a situation, Jonathan said. Marcus was at his kitchen counter making coffee, an actual task he had started doing himself 3 weeks ago, a small recalibration of routine that had something to do with a Saturday morning in a park and a conversation about what used to feel exciting. He set down the coffee filter. What situation? A woman named Brittany Walsh is being interviewed this morning on Pacific Morning, Jonathan said. Pacific Morning was the most-watched morning news program in the Bay Area, with a segment that covered both hard news and lifestyle pieces. She's apparently going public with a story about having gone on a blind date with you. The kitchen was quiet. She didn't know who you were when you went on the date, Jonathan continued. She found out afterward. Apparently someone recognized your name from the Patrick Chen connection, and it got back to her about 2 days after the date. She's been— He paused, with the careful hesitation of someone delivering an uncomfortable report to their employer. She has been, from what we've gathered, telling the story at dinners and parties for the last 3 weeks, and now she's going to tell it on television. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What's her version of the story? Jonathan paused again. She's framing it as a charming anecdote, meeting a billionaire without knowing it, being completely natural and genuine, and then being surprised to discover who he was. She's saying she found the whole thing funny and surreal, and that she hopes you have no hard feelings. He could hear the careful diplomacy in Jonathan's voice, the professional pruning of what the actual story sounded like. My sweatshirt was the reason I wasn't worth her time, Marcus said. Jonathan said nothing for a moment. I know. She gave me a lecture on first impressions on a public sidewalk. I know. Jonathan cleared his throat. I've seen some of the social media posts from the dinners. She's been somewhat less diplomatic in those settings than she apparently plans to be on television. Marcus poured his coffee. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse kitchen and watched a container ship moving slowly across the bay. He thought about what he actually felt, which he had been doing more often lately, actually investigating the internal weather rather than just managing it. He felt, he discovered, something that was not quite what he would have expected. Not anger, not the desire for retaliation, not the instinct to protect his reputation. He felt clarity. The same clarity you feel when you've been confused about something for a long time, and then a thing happens that removes the confusion entirely. He had gone on that date with a theory. The theory was that he could not find genuine connection because of who he was, because his money made it impossible for people to see past the money. Brittany had not disproved this theory. She had in fact confirmed it with uncomfortable precision. The rejection was efficient. The coldness was calibrated to exactly what she thought he was worth. But the theory had been incomplete, because the theory had not accounted for the other thing that had happened that evening. The thing on the bench, the small hand with the Christmas cookie, the woman in the sensible boots who had said, "Take it, please," and sat down in the cold and talked to him like he was a person, for no reason, with nothing to gain, because that was who she was. He hadn't told Sarah who he was. He hadn't told her in the park on Saturday either, or the week after that. They had met 3 times now in that little pocket park, and the meetings had the quality of something delicate and true, the kind of thing you don't add weight to prematurely for fear of changing its nature. They talked. Lily performed her ongoing assessment of the world with her characteristic philosophical rigor. Marcus bought the hot chocolate on the second Saturday, and Lily declared this the correct decision. Sarah told him about the week's hard cases at the hospital, and he listened in the way he was learning to listen, not for gaps where he could insert solutions, not for problems where he could assert competence, but simply to bear witness. And he told him things, actual things, not the performed bio, not the curated narrative, about what it was like to build something from nothing, what his father had been like, what loneliness felt like when it was made of marble floors and a staff of 12. She had looked at him, after that last disclosure, with the nurse's brand of attention, trained to read the vital signs of what people didn't quite say, and she had said, "That must be a very specific kind of lonely." "It is," he had said. She hadn't asked how much money he had. 3 days later, the story had done what Jonathan had predicted. The Billionaire's Secret Test. That was the headline on most of the outlets, or variations of it. The story had traveled from the Pacific Morning segment through entertainment sites, then into think pieces about wealth and authenticity, then into the kind of social media wildfire that burns for exactly 48 hours before the next thing arrives. There were takes, there were counter-takes, there were people who found it charming and people who found it offensive, and people who thought it was an invasion of Brittany Walsh's privacy, and people who thought Brittany Walsh had made her own bed by going on television in the first place. Brittany Walsh's television appearance had, in the 3 days since, taken on a different quality in the public imagination than she had intended. She had arrived on the set of Pacific Morning prepared to tell a story about her own charming obliviousness. "I had no idea who he was. It's so funny. I hope we can laugh about it." She had worn a beautiful dress, she had smiled her practiced smile, and she had told the story, including, probably because the hosts had pushed her, probably because it made a better story, probably because she had told it so many times in private that it no longer felt dangerous, the part about the sidewalk, the sweatshirt, what it said about first impressions, the word nice. The clip had done its own traveling, separately from the main story. People had thoughts about the clip. Marcus had not watched it. He had read Jonathan's summary, which was enough. He had also received, in the 3 days since, 462 media requests, which Jonathan was managing. A hand-delivered letter from Brittany Walsh's publicist suggesting a joint interview opportunity to address the narrative in a positive way for both parties, which Marcus had asked Jonathan to decline without response, and 11 calls from people he'd gone to business school with, most of which were some variation of, "Man, I saw the story, how are you holding up?" He was, he told them all, fine. This was the truest, simple answer he had given to that question in a long time. On Thursday morning, he drove himself, not the car, himself, in a car he kept specifically for the occasions when he wanted to drive, to a building on Irving Street in the Sunset District. It was a 4-story apartment building with a clean facade and a small garden out front that had been well maintained through the winter. He found parking 2 blocks away and walked. He had flowers. This felt, in the cold light of Thursday morning, both right and potentially too much, and he had almost put them back twice on the way out of the florist, but then had kept them because honest things are worth doing awkwardly. He buzzed apartment 3B. A pause, then Lily's voice, unmistakable even through a buzzer speaker. "Who is it?" "It's Marcus." A brief pause, as if confirming this was correct data, then, "Mama, it's Marcus!" A longer pause, then Sarah's voice, warm and slightly amused, "Come up." She met him at the door of the apartment. She had the look of someone who had been home for exactly long enough to change out of work. They talked for a long time. He told her things he had not told anyone. About his father, who had worked 2 jobs and died at 61 of a heart attack he had probably been ignoring for 2 years because he couldn't afford to stop working long enough to address it. About how that had been the fuel for everything, the original engine of all the drive and the work and the building. Not ambition, exactly, not the desire for success for its own sake, but the specific, furious intention to build something large enough that he would never have to ignore a health problem to keep going. About how you can build something that large and discover that the original intention, the real human reason, has gotten buried somewhere underneath it, and you've forgotten how to find it. She told him about Lily's father, who was, she said again, a good person. They were better as friends and co-parents than they had ever been as a couple. And she said this without residue, without the particular quality of people who have not finished a feeling. She told him about the years after the separation when she had worked night shifts and Lily was small, and some months the math was very tight, and what had gotten her through it was not optimism exactly, but stubbornness, the flat refusal to let the situation be the story. "You're extraordinary," he said. He said it simply, as a fact, without the romantic weight that might have made it complicated. She looked at him. I'm ordinary, she said. I'm very specifically ordinary. That's actually the thing I'm most proud of. I don't think you know what ordinary looks like from where I've been standing, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the sunset was doing what the sunset does in December, fog settling over the avenues, the city going soft and quiet. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes. That night in the park, you sat on that bench for a while before Lily found you. What were you thinking about?" He considered the answer, the real one. "I was thinking about how strange it is," he said slowly, "to spend your life accumulating things that are supposed to make you safe, and then to realize that the things you actually needed safety from were inside you the whole time. Loneliness, the feeling that nobody was ever responding to you, to the actual you." He paused. "I was very tired. I was sitting there being tired in a way I didn't know what to do with." "And then Lily gave you a cookie," Sarah said. "And then Lily gave me a cookie." They looked at each other, and the look had the quality of something that has been built carefully over time, not rushed, not performed, not constructed out of proximity or convenience, built out of honesty, out of sitting in the cold and talking about real things, out of a small girl in a pom-pom hat who had decided, with the absolute moral clarity of the very young, that someone who needed something good should have some. "I don't need your money, Marcus," Sarah said. "I want you to hear that and believe it, not because I'm performing some kind of principle, but because it's actually true. My life is full. Lily is healthy. I have work that matters and friends I love, and a Christmas tree with ugly ornaments I have been making every year since I was 24. She looked at him steadily. "What I want to know, what I need to know, is who you are when nobody's watching." "You've already seen that. You've been watching for weeks." "I know," she said, and she smiled then, the real one, unperformed. "That's why I'm still here." What happened next was not dramatic. There was no grand gesture, no declarative speech, no cinematic swelling of music. He simply reached over and took her hand, and she let him, and they sat in the quiet of an apartment in the sunset with the fog outside and the ugly Christmas tree ornaments and the sleeping child in the next room who had started. On a Saturday in February, 3 people walked through the Christmas market, which had become, by February, a general winter market, different vendors, the white lights still strong in the trees. One of them was a man in a good wool coat who was also, though nobody here knew it, the 3rd wealthiest person in the country. One of them was a woman in sensible boots who had, that week, been cited in her department as Employee of the Year, which had embarrassed her and pleased her in equal measure. And one of them was a small person in a red hat with a pom-pom, who was currently engaged in the task of selecting a hot chocolate, a process she was approaching with the seriousness it deserved. "The one with the whipped cream," Lily said. "We all know that's what you're going to say," Sarah said. "You say it every time." "Because it's always the right answer," Lily said serenely. Marcus bought 3 hot chocolates, all with whipped cream, because the right answer is the right answer. They walked through the market in the winter air, Lily between them, holding both their hands, not because anyone had orchestrated this, but because she had simply taken one hand each, with the proprietary confidence of someone who has decided that a thing is hers. She swung lightly between them as they walked, her boots, new boots this time, still ducks because when something works you don't change it, clearing the ground with each swing. Marcus thought about a bench, about cold hands and a stolen shortbread star and a pom-pom moving in the dark. He thought about what it had cost him that night, the humiliation, the sidewalk, the click of heels retreating. He thought about what it had given him. There is a kind of wealth that appears on no list. It doesn't compound annually. It can't be transferred, leveraged, or diversified. It can't be built by any strategy or protected by any lawyer. It arrives when it arrives, the way most real things arrive, sideways, unexpectedly, in cold parks, from strangers with cookies, in the unfiltered eyes of a small person who looks at you and thinks, "You seem fine," and you needed it more. It is the wealth of being known, of being seen without the scaffold of what you have and wanted for what you are, of discovering, after years of marble floors and closed windows and the specific loneliness of the very successful, that the things that can actually fill a person are not buyable, they are findable. They are available to everyone, in small parks with Christmas lights and vendor carts and children in ridiculous hats. You just have to be willing to sit on the bench.